Hello and welcome to Sharon Local History. Welcome to Sharon, Massachusetts. And I would like to share this incredible presentation by Thomas Palmer with you. So this was during Sharon Friends of Conservation Annual potluck, and as a feature presentation we invited Tom Palmer, who is an amateur naturalist. He's also an amazing photographer and he's a huge conservation advocate. Tom wrote few books, and he's author of this famous book, Landscape with Reptiles. He is an expert on snakes around Milton and Blue Hills. So here is Thomas. I hope you will enjoy this talk. It's rather long, but it's incredible source of information.
Hi everyone. First of all, I'd like to mention that Tom has been nice enough to bring some of his books for sale, and he's offered to autograph them. So after the talk, everyone is welcome to buy one and get it autographed. Thomas Palmer is he lives in Milton. He's a naturalist and photographer. He's the author of 3 books, and as Paul mentioned, especially Landscape with Reptile, about the history of the Blue Hills and about the snakes that live there. It's a wonderful book. I've read it, and I highly recommend it to everyone. Like I said, he's brought copies here. He's a dedicated environmentalist, the former president of the Friends of Blue Hills, and he was just reappointed to the Milton Conservation Commission. And Tom has a daughter and a grandchild who live in Sharon. Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Can you hear me? This
No,
is
Mike. You just have to speak up, Tom.
all right. This is not a microphone; it's a microphone stand.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Yes. Years ago, Greg Meister,
Yeah.
your agent, contacted people like myself who have a particular interest in snakes, and said, "Come to Sharon and find out if there are any rattlesnakes on Rattlesnake Hill." I would say that was more like 20 years ago, because it was at a time that there was a lot of development pressure in that area, and if these animals had been found, it would have increased the value of the land in the eyes of the state for acquisition. There was maybe 5 or 6 of us who scoured the hill during emergence, a point in every rattlesnake's life, hoping to establish that some snakes had survived on Rattlesnake Hill. It was prompted by a report by a consultant to a developer who did not say in the report that he saw what he thought was a rattlesnake, but told people about it. That word got out, and Greg decided, let's see if they're there. Well, we did not find any, but later, after I show these pictures, let's talk a little bit about these recent sightings. Very interesting that they are popping up again. Interestingly, throughout the state of Massachusetts, there are many features called Rattlesnake Hill or Rattlesnake Creek or Rattlesnake Island, but wherever you have a landscape feature with rattlesnake in the name, there are no rattlesnakes. That's just a fact. So I'm going to show you some pictures of various snakes and talk a little bit about why some are common and some are scarce. This, as you probably know, is a garter snake, and it is the lined form. There's also a checked form. This is a snake that doesn't need any conservation help. If your house lot is more than a half acre, you may have one at your house. They like stone foundations, retaining walls, piles of rock. They don't require much to get underground for the winter. And like all snakes, they can't keep themselves warm, so they have to retreat below the frost. Here's one from the Blue Hills. Look at that large eye. All snakes are predators. They need good vision to find their prey. Who knows what kind of snake this is? That's called a brown snake. It's almost an urban snake. Very small snake that prefers slugs and snails. And it can be found in vacant lots in Dorchester easier than it can be found in Moose Hill, for instance. Why they are so prevalent in vacant lots, I don't know. But they are not of conservation concern. Paul had a picture of this, a ringneck snake. Not uncommon, but seldom seen. The way to find them is to turn over logs and stones and pieces of wood because they hide underneath. And if you do that diligently in wooded areas, you will find them.
Is that a normal tail or is that an injury?
No, it got hurt somehow. It got bit off, it looks like. Here is a smooth green snake. Very pretty snake. Just gorgeous. And those I don't encounter often. They seem to like coastal thickets, particularly, and maybe in inland areas, open fields. I can't really tell you much about them because I so seldom see them. But again, they are not listed by the state as species worthy of protection because of rarity. There is a milk snake. Milk snakes are pretty familiar. There's a baby milk snake. They're very colorful when they're young. They are sneaky biters. If you pick them up, they won't bite you right away. But just when you stop watching them, they will latch onto you. And they don't let go easily. So have a care if you pick them up. This is a northern water snake. And as adults, they often lose their pattern and become dark black like this. And fishermen call them moccasins. They can be found alongside most bodies of water in the state. If you live in water, you have a sort of built-in advantage against development because as development proceeds, water features often survive, and animals that stay in the water can survive as well. This is the other kind of black snake in the state called a black racer. As you can see, it has a satiny look. It's an upland animal, very fast and active. These are on the Blue Hills, and who was it? Larry told me, Larry Kramer, I'm sorry. Did I get your name right? Richard, yeah. Found at Moose Hill and near the fire tower.
That was Rattlesnake Hill.
Oh, good. They like large areas with open ledges, large wooded areas. That one got picked up and didn't bite. As you can see, they're quite long and narrow. They hunt in daylight and they pursue their prey. I remember I tried to catch one and he was so alarmed at me running after him that he spat out the frog he was trying to eat. This is a copperhead. This is a much rarer snake, and it's also venomous. And it has that viper head, that triangular head. You can also see this little pore here called a pit. Technically, copperheads are pit vipers like rattlesnakes. And this is a heat sensing organ. Inside that pit, there's a little membrane like a eardrum that is heavily innervated and it can detect. I didn't mean to do that. I'm leaning out the wrong way. There's a rattlesnake. I would like to go back, but I need to get out of that.
I think just...
I got it.
Got it?
Yeah. All right. So, I'm showing you some pit vipers from the Blue Hills. There are two species. They are the copperhead and the rattlesnake. Do you see this wound here?
Yeah.
That's a lawnmower, rotary blade lawnmower. This animal had healed quite a bit, was found in the same yard where perhaps it was wounded. Here's a timber rattlesnake in the Blue Hills. A large snake, a heavy snake, snake, hard to ignore if you come across it. They can weigh several pounds. Dangerous animals. They have long glands in the sides of their head with venom, and they use the venom to immobilize their prey, which is warm-blooded animals, mostly birds and mammals, particularly rodents like chipmunks and squirrels, rabbits maybe for a big one. And they can detect a warm-blooded prey species with a pit, like the copperhead. Even at night, they're sit-and-wait predators. Unlike a black racer, they do not chase anything. They wait in an area where their sense of smell tells them that animals pass. And when one goes by, they bite it and let go. And it runs off and soon dies. And they follow it, using their tongue to scent the trail. And when they find it, it's warm and dead and ready to swallow. There's rattles. The rattles are tapered on a young animal, and there's no taper left in this rattle. So this is an adult of some age. There's more. You can't count the rattles to get the years. It's because they add a button every time they shed, but they don't shed once a year. It varies. But as you can see, it's starting to come loose here, and probably this piece will come off. And it's also missing ones that it had before. So this is a big animal. They are long-lived. They can live to be over 25. The one at Trailside for years, I think, had a kind of longevity record, because I think they had it over 40 years. This is a screenshot from a wonderful website called the Mass Herp Atlas, put together by Mass Audubon and UMass. What it was a collective project of naturalists in the state who are asked, anytime you find a herp, herps meaning reptile amphibian, photo it and send us a photo and tell us where and when you saw it, just like your own site here in Sharon. And so these little blue boxes are individual verified sightings, and they're usually part of a block of 6, which corresponds to a USGS quad. So the dark blue sites are where animals were found. The light blue are the blocks where the sightings were made, and the orange are unconfirmed, where they had reports but no document, no fight. But you see that Agara snakes have been found all over the state, covering the entire state, really, from Southwest Mass to the islands, Cape Cod, Cape Ann, and even right here in Boston, many records. Here's a snake not quite as common called the milk snake, which doesn't survive in developed areas unlike garters, but it doesn't need that much of a natural area. So it's still quite close to Boston, not in Boston, and generally around the state. And these empty spots, like Northwest Mass, might mean there's just not enough naturalists up there, not that there's no milk snake. Here we're looking at the smooth green snake, and you see it's a different picture. There are not that many records. There's only about 40 records. That's a concern to the state, but it's poorly understood why they're uncommon, but they are not uncommon enough to be protected. They are somewhat rare, but not rare enough to trigger the Endangered Species Act. I really can't explain this distribution. When I found them, that's usually been along the coast, in scrubby areas along the shore, but there seems to be a concentration out here as well. Maybe that has something to do with, I don't know, I can't explain it. Looks like the Berkshires. Now we're getting into rare. This is where timber rattlesnakes were reported to the Herp Atlas in Massachusetts. And you can see there are not many places. Here is the Blue Hills, Here is Sharon. This is Mount Tekoa, just past the river, Connecticut River. And this is the southwest corner, Jug End and Egremont. I was talking about that earlier. So this is rare, right? If you count the blue squares, there's less than 20. I'm going to show you a different map that is about a different kind of rarity. Here's the copperheads, even less. But curiously, the copperheads are common in New Jersey and Connecticut. The reason they're rare in Massachusetts, unlike the rattlesnakes, is not because they've been killed so extensively, but because they're at the ragged northern edge of their tolerance. And they're just scarce in states as cold as Massachusetts. Why they have survived in these two places, it may be the particular topography really adds to the warmth that they need. That may be the reason. But the state doesn't care why you are scarce. It just cares that you are scarce. So I found this on the web. This to me is a wonderful range map of the timber rattlesnake. And those little black dots, they look like poppy seeds. Those are records. And you can see New England is nearly blank, right? There are very few. Blue Hills, this is Glastonbury in Connecticut, Lake George in New York, and West Haven, Vermont. But they are all but gone. And if that were the situation in the rest of the country, then they would be federally endangered. But as you can see, north central Pennsylvania, the Hudson Highlands, the Blue Ridge, and down here, coastal South Carolina, where you see the gray, that means they're not individual records, but the habitat is so continuous that it's assumed that they live generally in the colored areas. So it's a difference between the south, where they're called canebrake rattlers, and the north, where they're called timber rattlers. And this is a completely different situation than these isolated relict populations. All right, this is just to show you how much Massachusetts has developed. It's mostly green, right? Those are trees. But here you see this gray confetti. That is denser development. And in the Connecticut Valley, you see this pale green, which is agricultural development. So you see the state, if you were to fly over it, is not all nature by any means. There's quite a bit of land that has been converted to other uses that may no longer be usable by animals or in the same way. This is just to show you how many roads there are. This is the state's major road maps. And here we are in Sharon, which is a little patch of green here, isn't it? But overall, the state is completely covered with a road network, and that is a big deal for snakes, because snakes are stuck on the ground and can't travel anywhere without crawling on their belly. They can swim as well, but in contrast to, say, birds, which can easily fly over a road, snakes have to cross, and if there's traffic, they will get squashed. So that is a way snakes disappear. This is a contrasting map called the biomap. This is another thing we can be proud of being from Massachusetts, because the state has done a very sophisticated effort to map biodiversity. That's what this map is about. The greener the areas are, the more surviving natural habitat they have, and the more animals and plants that may be becoming scarce. And you can see, generally around Boston, there's not much green. But as you get into Berkshires and Plymouth County, there are more and larger natural areas. The darker ones are called core habitat. The lighter ones are called critical natural landscapes. And this is a planning tool that the state uses for trying to decide which areas would be most valuable to protect from development, where the existing diversity exists, rather than places where it does not. So if they have land to buy, money to buy conservation land, or they trying to decide where to site a road and so forth, this could help. This could tell you what areas to avoid. This is the same map zoomed in on southern Norfolk County, and this is the Blue Hills. This is 128 going in a circle around Boston. Here's Route 3, and here's 95 to Providence. And once again, we see Sharon has a lot of green. Sharon is the greenest town in Norfolk County. Sharon has, as you know very well, has a long history of conservation. It attracts people who like nature, and those people work to protect it. So over generations, Sharon has succeeded in keeping a lot of its natural assets. And if you are a rattlesnake looking for a place to live, you would say, I want the biggest, greenest patches. So that is these two. Over here, this is Wampatuck State Park in Hingham, large area. This is Charles River in Medfield. There are other areas. But woods are not the only thing that rattlesnakes and copperheads need. I'll go on. This is just another look at the Blue Hills. And you see the green part is surrounded by, here's Norwood, Reedville, Hyde Park, Milton, Quincy, Braintree, Randolph. If you are a wild thing and you live in that patch of green, you are stuck there because you can't go anywhere else without leaving your safe place. And that is a big deal for species conservation because it means the remaining populations become isolated and can't trade genes with their relatives. And that leads to bad consequences of various kinds. Here is Route 93 going by Wood Road and Braintree, photoed from Pine Hill, which is the one Blue Hill that did not get into the Blue Hills Reservation and now is covered with corporate headquarters and so forth. So if a snake living in this part of the Blue Hills would like to go to this part of the Blue Hills, there are not many alternatives. Perhaps a culvert carrying a waterway could get through that, but it will not get across this road alive. And even some of the faster animals still do not survive road crossings. Here's a young coyote. This is Route 28 between Randolph and Milton. And this is normal weekend traffic. A snake can't move very fast. A snake can't get across here without being smashed. Now here is a law that has existed in the state since about 1980 in response to the 1973 Federal Endangered Species Act. This is the state version. Massachusetts said, just because North Carolina doesn't have has a lot of rattlesnakes still, doesn't mean we shouldn't protect things that are rare in our state. Not necessarily rattlesnakes, but anything. Bald eagles, herring, insects, wildflowers, anything. Anything that is rare, the people have decided that they are going to make it their responsibility to prevent it from becoming rarer. That's the point of this Endangered Species Act. If species in Massachusetts are found to be declining to the point of endangerment, the state will try to prevent them from becoming extinct. That's a bold thing to say, considering that how many thousands and thousands of species there are, most of them insects, I guess. At any rate, the state does now maintain a list of rare species, and it's hierarchical. It goes endangered, threatened, and special concern. Endangered means there is only 5 occurrences or less left in the state. 5 populations, 5 habitats. Threatened means 20 or less, and I think special concern means 40 or less. So that's why it is now illegal to kill a rattlesnake, where it was once considered a civic duty. The reason rattlesnakes are so scarce in this state is not because all the habitat has disappeared, but because they're particularly vulnerable to persecution. And that has been going on for generations. Here's a view from Moose Hill of the Blue Hills. You see the Blue Hills are a range of hills, and they also run east to west. That's an important fact. Why does it look so weird here? It's just 2 photos that I stitched together. This would have been too blown out, so I just wanted to see both parts. Here are the 3 color phases of timber rattlesnakes. Can you tell there's a black one there? Right in the middle? Yes. Here's the normal color phase. This I would call the pale phase as well. There's a dark phase and the light phase. And I would call these both light phase, I guess. The dark phase is almost black. Now, what are they all doing together?
Trying to keep warm.
They just came out of the den. This is in May. It's the period called emergence. Unlike most of the snakes in Massachusetts, they are communal denners. That means they gather at the same cracks in ledges winter after winter and spend half the year underground. And how do the young ones get incorporated into these dens? The birth takes place in an open area with rocks, and the babies follow their mother's scent trail to the den. That's how they find it. And once they have been there one winter, they know how to go back. But the fact that they gather there, and a population that is spread out over several miles will concentrate over a few weeks in May, this is when they come out to sun themselves after being underground, means that if you go to the dens and kill the snakes, you can wipe out the population if you do that persistently over several seasons. And that's what happened all over the Northeast. The people that occupied the land, namely farmers, went to the dens in the spring, and they didn't always do it out of, I guess, civic duty. They did it partly to earn money to stay drunk, because there were bounties on these animals in many towns, and if you brought in a rattle, you could get a few bucks. And when I was writing my book, I was able to track the range of the snakes by looking at old town histories and seeing if they had bounties and when they were paid and when they stopped being paid. And there are many, 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 many towns that had them. So it was that killing at the dens that shrank the range of rattlesnakes in Massachusetts from 200 or 300 towns to 4 or 5. And all that activity was over by about 1850 or something, before the Civil War. That's when the towns became snake-free, generally. And in all the time that's gone on since, the snakes have not, now that the pressure has been removed for the most part, the snakes have not recovered, unlike so many other species that did. Deer, beaver, fisher, bald eagles, osprey, many management successes with many other species. The snakes are less able, it seems, to rebound.
Question.
Yeah?
Question.
Yes.
Do the males come out first?
No, I would say the mating is actually in late summer.
Okay.
And I don't know why that is, but I don't think it's the case.
Okay.
This is a snake den. That's what it looks like. It's a ledge with holes underneath, and that gives the animals access to deep crevices where the frost doesn't reach. People who have stuck thermometers down these dens have found that they go down to like 40 degrees maybe, but no further. So the snakes are more or less torpid and unmotionless, or they move little, and they stay there until the temperature curve reverses, because it's when it's 40 underground, it's 20 above. But somehow around the end of April, suddenly it's warmer above than it is down below, and they come out. And they spend a week or two near the den entrances basking and warming up and getting ready to spread out into the landscape. And that is when they used to be killed as a sort of a public holiday, and that's how they disappeared. So here's the fact sheet published by the state. Publishes many of these sheets for state-listed species. When I say state-listed, I mean a species that has been assigned the category of endangered, threatened, or special concern. You can see that timbers are endangered. Here's some text from the fact sheet. Generally restricted to mountainous terrain. Is that what you would call 128? Not really. Characterized by second growth, deciduous or coniferous forests with steep ledges, rock slides, and large rodent populations. Rattlesnakes hibernate communally in underground crevices. Some other snakes will do that as well. Copperheads will do that, racers a little bit, and sometimes different species will be found together. But rattlesnakes are particularly vulnerable because they're what ecologists call, I believe it's R-selected, meaning an animal that does not breed that often, but invests quite a bit in each offspring and is long-lived, so it has several opportunities to breed. Another word is iteroparous. And what it means is a mama rattlesnake only has 9 or 10 babies, each about 9 or 10 inches long, and she takes her 3 more years to build up enough fat to have another litter. So in her whole lifetime, she can give birth to, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 snakes. That's not really a lot when you're trying to rebuild populations. Management recommendations. Increasing public and conservation land holdings in prime timber rattlesnake habitats continues to be an important conservation strategy for the species. That was what Greg Meister was thinking about when he asked us to find those snakes. Interesting the state in preserving land in Sharon. Along with a high level of protection of dens and basking sites, maintaining a level of secrecy about their locations is important for restricting human access to key habitat features in order to avoid disturbing and stressing snakes. So, people who know where the dens are need to keep quiet about it, because many people will go to the dens with nothing violent in mind, but just the traffic will disturb the snakes enough that it will affect their longevity or their life cycles and so forth. So if you want to find rattlesnakes, you really have to find them yourself. And if you do find them, and you were there in the spring when they come out, the other people who know about the den will be there too. And they'll realize, well, we have to welcome you into the fraternity of snake watchers, because you know. There's no point in hiding the information that you already have. So that's how I got to know some of the other snake watchers, by finding the snakes myself and then seeing them there. So that's an interesting sort of folk way. Here is the state's bright idea for protecting rattlesnakes, so we don't have to worry if the blue gill population will all be run over. This is Mount Zion Island in Quabbin Reservoir, and it was about 10 years ago the state said, to make sure that the snakes don't disappear, let's start a new population in their former habitat, in an island in the Quabbin, where they once existed but no longer do. And that plan was shot down by the residents of Central Mass. Not all of them. A majority thought it was a good idea, but enough said, they'll swim off the island and bite us and kill us. There were a lot of people who said that. That wasn't a realistic possibility, but as you know, if you are in office, you hesitate to do anything that anyone objects to. And in the Quabbin area, people are already sore about what the state did by flooding all their towns and turning into a reservoir for Boston. So a state-mandated plan, they always look at it skeptically, and there were enough of them that this project did not happen. What would be the advantage of having a population there? It's far from people, there would be no snakes getting run over, and the things that have caused declines, for instance, in the Blue Hills, probably wouldn't operate.
When was that they proposed that? How long ago?
About 10 or 15 years. I don't remember exactly. There was a public hearing in the town of Athol. It's online, and you can go and look at that and see all the reasons that this plan made the local people hot. Now, here's another conservation strategy that is being pursued, but I'm not going to say a whole lot about it because it hasn't been publicized, and the people who are participating in it don't want it to be publicized. Maybe for the same reasons that the Quabbin scheme failed, because enough people got upset about it that it was politically squashed. What is this conservation strategy? It's called head starting. You've probably heard of that. Head starting is a way to augment natural populations by adding more youngsters. What you do is you take the baby snakes when they're born in the summer, you raise them indoors. They grow faster than they would normally in the wild, and when you release them, they are big enough to be better able to defend themselves and presumably be more likely to survive. That has been done for many years with Plymouth red-bellied turtles, Head Start program. They are federally endangered. This project has worked in the Blue Hills to the extent that when the snakes are released, they're given pit tags, which is a little electronic device that if you pass a reader over the animal, it can detect it and give you a number. A lot of animal shelters use them on pets and so forth. At any rate, pit-tagged, head-started rattlers have been released and have survived. It took a while before that conclusion or that data was acquired, but it is true. So this works. So if the problem with your population is that it's declining, you could perhaps stem its decline by adding more animals, and that's going on in the Blue Hills. It is funded by a combination of private contributions and nonprofits, and it's pretty hush-hush. So I'm not going to say any more about it, but it is one piece of the toolkit that has been worked out and is now being taken advantage of. Here's another kind of conservation. This is a copperhead that got into a backyard, and normally you do not want any poisonous snakes in your yard, particularly if you have kids. So you call the snake man, and the snake man comes and catches the snake and puts it in the cooler and takes it back to the woods. And that's what happened in this instance. Copperheads have an interesting ventral pattern. They are pit vipers, but you see there's no rattle. They do have a red tongue instead of the black of the rattler. This is a pretty large snake. This, by the one, is the same one that was scalped by the lawnmower in the earlier photo. And by the way, the guy holding the snake hook is James Condon, who we discussed before. You called him, right? Or he called you?
We talked, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is important. It's important for people who live near the remaining habitats to feel safe. And this is a way you can help them feel safe, by removing any animal that strays onto their property. Why are you not responding? Oh.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So if you bring them to different environment, they survive no problem? If they capture them and bring them to another area, they survive no problem?
They're not taken far. No, it's really because they imprint, so to speak, on a den. If you take an existing adult from one area and bring it to another, it will keep looking for its den until it freezes to death. That's why, if you're trying to augment a population, you have to do it with youngsters rather than adults collected elsewhere. Is that the question? Yeah, when you're removing them from a lawn, you do not want to take them so far away that they won't be able to find their den, but you do want to take them so far away that they won't be back in the yard the next day. And this one hung out in some yew bushes. They were cut down low into a rim around a swimming pool. And I went to see it. I was called about it, but I was not as good as James, and I didn't catch it. I'm not very good at handling snakes, so I'm glad that James came. All right, here we are looking at the Blue Hills again, and the reason I included this from Google Earth is I said that the females need warmth in order to mature their babies. That means they can't stay in the normal adult habitat, which is closed canopy woods, mixed woods, oak and pine woods. All over the Blue Hills is plenty of that adult habitat, where they hunt, where they travel, where they spend most of their lives. But the females must find open rock. And you can see the rock here. Here's Blue Hill, Hancock Hill, Buck Hill, Chickatawba Hill, Hawk Hill. All these exposed ledges are cracked and are gestation habitat for females. If you have woods without ledges, you can't have rattlesnakes. But Rattlesnake Hill has ledges. Moose Hill has ledges. These are the babies. They're gray. They don't have a rattle. They just have a button. They're curled up right next to mom. And you see their eyes are milky. That means they're going to shed. After they shed once, this little button will have a little base on it. It adds a little section with each shed. So this is a group of 8 or 9 that were born around Labor Day and will shortly follow mom to a den. Here's another conservation issue with timber rattlers. Do you see this here? This is called SFD, snake fungal disease. That's fungus. This snake is very badly affected. This appeared in the Blue Hills 15 years ago. It was noticed because people who visited the dens saw fewer snakes, and one person, who's a very astute individual, kept going to them into the fall, and he found snakes exposed after Thanksgiving and even in January. What were they doing on the ground? that late in the year, they all had something like this. They all had lesions to the skin around the head. And the reason they stayed out was shedding their skin would help them shed these wounds. So they were on the ground trying to get warm in the winter when it isn't warm. And the ones that came out too late at that time generally weren't seen again. It's fatal if it gets very severe like this. And I noticed it was happening because the dens I go to, the snakes weren't there anymore. And as it happened, the population was decimated by this disease. Now, if you have a population of 5,000 snakes, and all populations circulate, right? It doesn't matter if you go down to 2,000 because you bounce back up to 5,000. But if you have a population entirely of maybe 60 adults, then it doesn't take much to take you below the 0 point, right? That's the end of the population. So any kind of fluctuation in these small and isolated populations runs the risk of extirpation. And extirpation is what happened to 98% of the rattlesnake dens in Massachusetts. Who is this? This is a herpetologist named Tigran, and here is a Blue Hills copperhead, and he is actually measuring its length by putting it inside his contraption and then running his roller pen over it. At any rate, here is another example of conservation, because in the last 10 years, the state spent serious money in the Blue Hills trying to find out how many snakes are left, how many rattlesnakes, how many copperheads. It's not an easy thing to do to count snakes. It takes real effort, and that effort was made. And in the Blue Hills, the end product of many thousands of money and grants was a spreadsheet. And the most important figure on that spreadsheet was the number 60, which was the estimate of adult rattlers remaining in the Blue Hills. Now, the Blue Hills is 7,000 acres. It's not that big, 7 miles long, 2 miles wide maybe. How many rattlesnakes would there be if it was a healthy population? That's also a difficult question to answer. But keep in mind that there might be only 2 or 3 pairs of coyotes in the Blue Hills, but coyotes are warm-blooded predators and have to eat every day, whereas snakes can only have 1 meal a month, and that's fine. They're cold-blooded, their energy requirements are less, so you can have a greater concentration of predators with a cold-blooded predator like this. And it may be that 60 snakes is less than what you might call the carrying capacity of the hills. Here is an animal that was found in a residential neighborhood outside the reservation. This is the black phase, and you can see it's still got the taper here, so it's a little bit younger. And it was easily a mile beyond the park border, so it had to travel quite a ways to be found on a suburban street. But it was captured and released back in the park, and that shows that the snakes are ready to occupy a new habitat, if there is any. In other words, they will disperse out away from their dens, but in many directions, there is nowhere to go. So that's my show, and I'm looking forward to the questions, because there's a lot going on regarding these animals in Sharon.
Can you clap? Thank you.
The question, yeah, here we go. Carl?
You said that we don't have too many communal nesting species. So the garter snakes in Canada are communal nesting, right?
Some of them.
Some of them.
In the far northern areas, they get more and more communal.
I see.
Yeah,
So
because
we
there are
don't-
fewer and fewer appropriate places.
Okay. So we don't. So those are not in Massachusetts. They're not communal.
Right, like garter snakes might overwinter together, but it's not part of their lifestyle.
Okay.
It's not, they seem to disperse more, as do the canebrake rattlers in the south, who do not need deep rock cracks, but can use a stump hole. Anyone else? Over here?
So I'm wondering about brown snakes, if they aren't more commonly seen in urban areas.
They are, that's where
Simply because they're very reticent. Because I found the brown snake in my yard one year. It was kind of medium size. It wasn't a new arrival. And I only saw it that one time, even though I kept looking for it. I'm wondering if they aren't much more plentiful in a place like this and just not seen.
Good question. I don't really know the answer to that. They are what they call fossorial, meaning they live in the ground. So there may be times of year when they're really not easy to find because they're below the leaf litter, but where you find them in vacant lots is by flipping debris. And in a natural forest, there is not that much pieces of tin and pieces of plywood that make it easy to look for snakes. You have some logs and rocks. I really don't understand why they are so much easier to find in urban areas, but they certainly are. Yeah, Paul?
Do rattlesnakes seek out wetlands in the summer? Do they find more food?
No, copperheads do though.
Oh.
Why they seem to seek out wetlands might have to do with the prey that can be found there. I don't think it's because they are thirsty. Snakes are very good at retaining water and don't have to drink much. That's one reason reptiles are so prominent in desert habitats, because they can conserve water very efficiently. Down here?
When is the last venomous snake bite of a human in Massachusetts or a fatality?
There's never been a documented fatality. That's something you can find in my book. I went to great lengths to research that. There's a colonial area gravestone is the best evidence, maybe, contemporary evidence from Central Mass. At any rate, as far as bites, the Brotherhood of Snake Watchers is always telling each other, don't be the first person. And it's true that these animals are not aggressive. And an animal that you see is not going to bite you because you can avoid it. The dangerous animal is the animal that you don't see and you step on. So the last chapter of my book is about hiking in the Blue Hills at night and worrying about stepping on snakes. Yes, way back here. Kurt again.
You have a place over here in Sharon on Lucille Street. It's
Yes.
past the trustees of reservations place, and there's the power lines that go through, and there's a lot
Yes.
of rocky outcrops, sort of a little cliff wall. So we go up and there bird watching, but you get these snakes going through, and they're not rattlesnakes, but they're rattling their tail
Yes.
to mimic.
Yeah, they do that.
And I don't know, are they indigo or are they black racer?
It wouldn't be an indigo, which is a southern species, but milk snakes and racers both do that tail vibration business.
Yeah.
And are they pretending to be rattlesnakes? They're pretending to be dangerous, I think. Yeah, it gets your attention. You think, uh-oh, when you hear that. So it is probably what you would call aposematic or warning behavior. It's more sophisticated in rattlesnakes because they have their dedicated device. As far as when the most recent bites have been, bites do occur occasionally. There haven't been any fatal ones, though copperhead bites are more common because copperheads are harder to see and smaller, and you're more likely to get too close. The last rattlesnake bite I'm aware of was, curiously, was a policeman from the North Shore town who said he was bitten in the Blue Hills, but it was a lie. He was bitten at home by a pet rattler. And, yes, and how the authorities figured that out, I don't know. I forget how that worked. But he was certainly disciplined for lying about it. He may even have been fired. I don't recall. That was the last rattler bite I can remember. I remember hearing about the copperhead bite, a landscaper on Mount Tom, I believe. There were copperhead bites in the Blue Hills, a couple of them in the 60s and 70s, but it's just a very rare event. I was saying earlier that the biting radius of a rattler is 18 inches. So if you're not closer than 18 inches, you're safe. They don't pursue people. They don't bite people if they don't have to. The rattling is to say, as they say, well, I wrote a short definition of rattlesnake in the book, and it says, a squat, scaly worm with don't touch on one end, and that's why on the other. Yeah, that describes it. Yeah.
I seem to recall in reading accounts over the years, usually copperhead bites in the Blue Hills, seems that it's far more likely that it's a dog that's bitten than a human.
Well, there was a dog. Yes, I remember that. It belonged to a woman from Quincy, I think. I think the dog survived as well. The snakes can't control how much venom that they inject with a bite, and they don't waste it on defense. A bite in defense is likely less dangerous because it has less venom. And some of the people who have been killed by timber rattlers have been pet keepers who are holding out a rat. Yes. So the snake is trying to kill dinner and provides an extra big dose. Yes. It's true that a healthy adult rattlesnake has enough venom if it were put in syringes to kill 2 or 3 adult humans. But it's rare for a bite to be fatal. Yeah, well, back
Do they go to bed at night? They're not out at night, are they?
They're out all the time.
Sleeping bags
Yes, if you walk around in the woods at night,
They want the sun.
no, they rely on summer temperatures to keep warm in the woods. The only ones that go out on the rocks during the summer are the pregnant females. And that's another reason why they were wiped out so easily. Because if you were killing only the pregnant females, you were really doing a number on a population.
To elaborate, the pit vipers. So the pits are infrared detectors.
They're
Yes.
out at, so are they out at night? Is it-
Yes, right.
It's so warm. They can get,
Yeah, and they're still hunting at night.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
lot of furry things move around at night. So sometimes, if there's a log in the woods, if there's a rattlesnake coiled beside it, it will often be resting its chin on the edge of the log because it knows the chipmunks run back and forth. Yes, it can tell. It can smell the trackway.
You have a question here?
Yes.
We were hiking recently on Moose Hill where it connects with Moose Hill Farm. And there's a sign close to Walpole Street about timber rattlesnakes cross through that area.
Really?
Yeah, have you ever seen it?
No, and I do not believe there's a natural population of rattlers or copperheads remaining in Sharon. But there have been recent sightings, and it's the collective opinion of the snake watchers, which includes state employees and conservation officials, that these animals are being released. by somebody, maybe one person, maybe several, somebody who thinks rattlers deserve to be restored to Sharon. And the reason it's being done without any kind of permission or notice is that it would not be permitted. People would not agree to it. People would say, no, we're worried about health of our kids. We don't want to worry about this. And so it would probably not succeed if it was a public, legitimate effort. So what might this accomplish? This occasional release of adults that seems to be going on? It's not the same as establishing a population, but it could lead to that if enough of them survived to breed and new individuals became associated with den sites, then there would be a new population. I think if there was such a population, it probably would be no more dangerous to the public than the animals in the Blue Hills, where there's very few bites, even though many thousands of people use the park annually. People commonly see rattlesnakes in the Blue Hills. Either they or the dog will spot it on the trail. Dog will get very excited. These animals are big. If it's on the trail, you're going to see it. So they go, and they stop and they take pictures and they get excited, but nobody gets bitten. Usually the snake will just crawl off, and they tell their friends, and it gets on Facebook and so forth. Yes?
Well, based on what you said earlier, it would seem unlikely that these adults would successfully den. So is this just
That's right.
doomed
That's
to
right.
failure anyways?
It might be. I don't know. That's a very good point. You know that all of Sharon and the Blue Hills and all of Massachusetts was covered with ice a mile deep only 18,000 years ago. So they had to come from down south where there were glacial refugia, maybe the Gulf Coast, and to get to Massachusetts, they had to cross the Potomac, the Hudson. They are capable of dispersing and expanding their range. But all the barriers we have put in place have made it difficult, so that, for instance, the Blue Hill snakes are probably not going to ever disperse to Sharon. There's too many subdivisions in between. Back here, Han?
We love seeing bald eagles around here, especially over the lake. Is there a relationship between population of snakes and increased population of bald eagles?
A friend of mine who's very knowledgeable about pit vipers thinks that their most effective predator is a red-tailed hawk. He thinks that they eat more rattlers than any other animal. I don't know. I think the bald eagles are back mostly because DDT was banned, I think. And they are a big success story. Yes, once the causes of death have been removed, and populations can be rebound. But something that kills many snakes in the Blue Hills are cars. When they go out on the road, they get squashed. And they do go out on the road because the breeding works as follows. When they're in heat, and these are adult females, and not all the adult females either, only the ones that have built up a lot of fat. When they're in heat, they give off an odor wherever they crawl. And that is the odor that the males want to find. And so they crawl around. They just ramble. Like August, early September, they just travel looking for female scent trails. And that's when they go out on the road. And that's why most of the snakes that are squashed on the road are males. And that's each one that gets squashed is no longer available to the population. How many get squashed every year? More than one. So a natural population would not have to deal with that mortality, but the Blue Hill snakes do. So is there kind of a lid on their ability to build up their numbers? That's a good question. Yeah.
The venom that's injected into the prey, once the snake eats the prey, how does that affect the venom in the snake?
If you were to swallow snake venom, it would not harm you because it's a complex mix of proteins that your acids would break down completely. So the snake is not poisoned by its own venom. The venom is believed to have evolved from salivary enzymes that work to break down food, like the ones that we have ourselves in our mouths and our guts. It's actually snake venom is a supercharged salivary enzyme. The snake venoms differ among species, and there's quite a bit of variety, and their effects are not very predictable. One of the chapters in my book is about a snake bite in Connecticut, in Glastonbury, that did become life-threatening, and it was not because of the enzymes themselves, but because the victim had been bitten before and it had developed an allergic reaction. So he not only had the destruction wrought by the venom itself, but his own shock to deal with. And he did survive, but it was a real adventure. The more you get bitten by a rattlesnake, the worse it is. And some of these Kentucky preachers who have been killed by snakes, they hold them like this in bunches. And if it's much worse to get bit here than it is to get bit here. So if they get bit on the neck, that is a health emergency. Yep.
Is there antivenom widely available in hospitals in Massachusetts?
No, it's very expensive and it doesn't last very long.
Okay.
It needs to be refrigerated. Yeah. So it's not an expense that a lot of hospitals are paying. And if you read my book, you'll see I'm kind of skeptical about whether these antivenoms work or not. I think I ultimately come down that they are effective, but there's just not enough use of them to know how well they are preventing worse outcomes. There's just not enough people to get bitten by snakes to have enough information about what treatments are effective. And certainly many people have been hurt more by the medicine than by the venom. Yeah.
So what does one do if they're bitten by a snake?
Get to a hospital quick as you can.
Yeah.
What would they do?
They're going to deal with what you would call the systemic symptoms, meaning they're going to make sure you get enough oxygen. They're going to make sure your blood is clotting properly and so forth. They're going to support your vital systems until the effect of the venom has lessened. So problems with breathing, problems with kidneys, problem with cardiac problems, they can try to deal with those and get you over the hump. And that's why you need to be at a hospital if you develop these problems. But it differs from snake to snake. Some snakes in other parts of the world have more dangerous venom that operates other ways. So there's no question that it's better to have anti-venom than not, but I'm not sure it can help you with every bite. Yeah?
I remember growing up, we used to carry snake bite kits
Yes.
in our packs.
Yes. Yeah, they're actually pretty harmful. You do not want to cut an X where the snake bit you because you're just going to bleed more. Yeah. That's not a good idea.
I threw that away a long time ago.
Yes.
They expired. Oh, just a little rubber thing with a knife. It doesn't expire.
Boy Scouts.
Yeah, Boy Scouts.
Kurt?
Oh, so you're saying don't spend your money on the kits?
No, definitely not.
Another question, if you get to hospital, they don't have the antivenom, but is there any drug that would help?
Yeah, well, for instance, one of the problems is bleeding problems. Your blood doesn't clot the way it's supposed to. And one possible consequence of that is in your lungs, the fluid may pass into your lungs, and you'll have a breathing difficulty. They can deal with that at a hospital. They can put you on a ventilator. The things that they can do to support your vital systems while you try to recover from the venom. And that's why get to a hospital, they'll know what to do. If you get no anti-venom, I think you're still probably going to be in good shape, but it depends. I don't want to tell any snake bite stories, but there are a lot of them.
Next book.
Yes. Yes, by the way, I'm bringing copies of my book that did not sell when it was published, so you can have them for my price, which is $5.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah?
What about a tourniquet? They say you buy.
No, don't do that. You do not want to make the circulation worse. The point of the tourniquet was supposedly to keep the venom from traveling,
Right.
but anywhere you concentrate it, you were going to magnify its effects. So that's not a good idea.
I just want to remind everyone, I've read the book. It talks about the personalities, the history, the wonderful people, the nature. I strongly recommend this book. And the prose is wonderful. It's beautifully written.
I don't write books anymore. I wrote 2 novels, then I wrote this book, and then I decided I really don't like spending all my time alone in a room, and I'm going to do other things. And I don't think I'll write any more books, but I am proud of this one. Gave it my best, and I think writing books is one of the things that uses the best of oneself. It really calls on you to be as honest and good as you can about what you're doing. Unlike, say, working the takeout window. Not that there's anything wrong with working the takeout window, but what I do now is I take photos mostly. I try to assemble information, and book writing I leave to the ones who still want to do it. Yes.
The venom, it basically begins to digest your tissue, correct?
That's
Is
right.
it necropathy?
Yeah, there's, particularly with the pit vipers, the local effects can be severe, whereas another group of snakes, namely the cobras and sea snakes and so forth, and the coral snakes, have what they call a neurotoxic venom, where there's very little tissue destruction, but it interferes with the involuntary muscle, and you may stop breathing because you simply can't expand your lungs. And so you will look good, but you will be dead.
One last question. Can I
Yes.
ask one last question?
Yes.
So if you have any of these snakes, like these people who found them in
Yes.
the yard,
Yes.
right? What do you recommend that we do? Because I'm guessing you don't call a pest company to get rid of
I
it.
would call James, as you did.
How did you find out about it?
Through the Trailside Museum.
Okay.
Because we saw a rattlesnake in Chickatawba in October, good size.
So you called the Trailside Museum
Yeah, to
and said, what do I
report
do?
it.
And they
Yeah,
said,
put me in
call
touch with
James.
him. Yeah.
Okay.
Very knowledgeable.
Yeah, James is a great guy, and will come to your house to remove a snake simply out of love for the animals.
You don't call the police, they wouldn't know.
Well, they would call James too, I guess. But, yeah.
So you said you take pictures, do you share them anywhere? Like, is there any way we can support you buying the book, but also do you have Facebook site, website, any place that you publish stuff?
It hadn't occurred to me. I'm retired now. I'm not worried about making money, and so I just let people find the book. A lot of people have found it. It's given me like a nice rep among snake nerds. My novels sold better maybe when they first came out, but they got more quickly forgotten. At any rate, yeah,
Look at this. That's fine.
well, I think this group is already doing the sort of stuff that leads people to want to enjoy and protect nature rather than fear and avoid it. So everything you do is a step in the right direction, in my view. Now that my daughter lives in Sharon, I want to spend more time here, get to know.
The membership is only $35.
Yes.
Yes.
Can we put it on our email list?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a great start. Okay. If anybody here is not on the email list, please write your email down.
I'm going to go get my sack of
And thank you.
This was a fantastic presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are interested in helping conservation efforts in town of Sharon, please join Sharon Friends of Conservation. Thank you for watching Sharon Local History.